Good afternoon. I didn't expect to be back quite as quickly as this. After Friday's update just 48 hours ago, there was a great deal of discussion about the officer who authorised the destruction of the evidence. So you'll remember from Friday, we had this letter dated the 31st of March where it said the name of the officer authorising disposal was not applied because they no longer work for Police Scotland. The same officer had authorised the disposal and had signed the documentation. Okay, so the discussion was about what level of authority would such an officer need to have to be able to access the various different departments, to gather up the evidence, to have it moved from one place to another. We know it wasn't like placed in the back of a car. It was thousands of productions that had to be moved. The level of authority needed to organise the destruction and all of that. We're not talking about your average Bobby on the beat here. We're talking about somebody with a level of authority. And I did say it looked like they were trying to scapegoat an individual officer, just with the wording of that letter. One of Luke's supporters posted yesterday, if one officer was able to carry out all of this and leave no paper trail, how many other times has this happened? Well, it would appear I've found a paper trail. One that leads all the way back to the officer who was responsible. Are you ready for this? So on the 15th of November 2022, we received a letter and it said, I write further to your letter addressed to the Lord Advocate dated 10th November. This office acts on behalf of the Lord Advocate and the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service. So basically it's the legal office, okay? I can confirm that following discussions with COPFIS, the Chief Constable of the Police Service of Scotland, the police, has been in the process of disposing of productions retained by the police in relation to your client's prosecution. The Chief Constable of the Police Service of Scotland. I don't care how they try to explain this one away. It's there in black and white in November 2022. The Chief Constable of Police Scotland has been in the process of destroying the evidence. Don't think you can make it any clearer than that. The last bit is also interesting. Accordingly, both the Lord Advocate and the police have an interest in relation to this matter. Well, they do, don't they? This latest letter was an attempt to chuck it back at the police and say, oh, it's up to them. It's up to them to deal with it. No. That very first letter in November says both COPFIS and the police have an interest in this. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Before I do though, who was the Chief Constable of Police Scotland in November 2022? That was Sir Ian Livingston. And you remember I said on Friday, couldn't possibly be that the officer responsible left the employment of Police Scotland after we caught them destroying evidence, could it? No, surely not. Well, let's have a look at the news headlines on the 23rd of February 2023. Oh, look. Police Scotland Chief Constable Ian Livingston is to stand down. Interesting. So that date, 23rd February, is it just a random date? Is it, of no consequence whatsoever? Or could there be a connection? You decide. On the 21st of February 2023, we received a letter. So 2 days before this announcement is made in the media. And this letter starts by saying, following dialogue between senior managers of Police Scotland and Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service during 2021, a disposal agreement was reached. As part of the initial decision-making, it was agreed that productions not detailed on the indictment could be disposed of. Police Scotland thereafter progressed the destruction of productions, but erroneously included those featuring on the indictment. So let's start there. These are decisions that have been taken at the highest level, and it's a fairly simple instruction: destroy the ones on this list, don't destroy the ones on that list. And they get it wrong. Okay, so let's have a look at the procedure that would normally take place, because they tell us in this letter what should normally happen. So for resolved cases, such as the case against Luke Mitchell, unless otherwise instructed by the court or Copfus, production should be disposed of at the conclusion of criminal proceedings. And this next bit, following receipt of a production release note. Let me explain that. So either the court or Copfus produces this production release note, and it lists what should be destroyed, what should be returned, and what should be retained indefinitely, if anything. That then goes to the police, and there's a conversation had with the senior officer for his agreement that they are returning the correct items, they are destroying the correct items, and they are retaining indefinitely, if necessary, the correct items. And that is how this process would normally go. We know that's how the process would normally go. Let's go back to our letter. Copfus have never issued a production release note for this case. Never. Now, remember the statement, unless otherwise instructed by the court or Copfus. So Police Scotland could not have done this by themselves. They didn't follow normal procedures by any stretch of the imagination. But they didn't do that of their own decision, because this letter is absolutely clear: unless otherwise instructed by the court or Copfus. Well, we know it wasn't the court. There have been no court proceedings. So that only leaves Copfus. So let's go back and have a look at what they were saying about these discussions. So, following dialogue between senior managers of Police Scotland, a disposal agreement was reached. What triggered that dialogue? What caused them all to come together and sit down and go, right, okay, we need to talk about the productions in the Luke Mitchell case, which are not actually due to be destroyed for another 3 years, but we'd best talk about them now. And why were those discussions at such a high level, all the way up to the Chief Constable? Well, I can only speculate. The documentary came out on 25th and 26th February 2021, and the decision to destroy the productions took place on the 26th of May 2021. So there's 3 months there for that dialogue to take place, 3 months for that discussion to take place. Is it possible that, in spite of their claims about timescales and everything else, is it possible that that decision had nothing whatsoever to do with the amount of time that had passed since the last proceedings, which was the SCCRC decision in 2014? Nothing to do with it. And everything to do with the can of worms that they knew that documentary was going to open. One of the other things that they gave us as an excuse for destroying the evidence is that they were unaware that there were going to be any further proceedings. Didn't know. Okay. We know that they didn't take the decision to destroy the evidence until May 26th. The petition was launched on February 26th, the day the second episode went out. And that was reported in the media, 26th of February 2021. A Scots criminologist is gaining support for a campaign for an independent review to be launched into the conviction of, they have to use it, murderer Luke Mitchell. Okay, by then it had about 5,000 signatures if you go through the article. But did they know about it? Were they aware that there was a petition campaigning for an independent review? Because they're claiming they didn't know about any review, right? Well, and I do have to give credit where credit's due. So a thank you to Jane Hamilton from the Daily Record, who on the 2nd of March, so a week after the petition was launched, by this stage it was up to about 15,000 signatures. Police say they are satisfied with the outcome and no other suspects have been identified. Well, at that stage they must have been asked about the possibility of a further review of the case. What other reason would they have to comment on how satisfied or otherwise they were about the outcome of the case? They must have been asked. And yet they want us to believe they didn't know that we were going to be pushing for an independent review. To bring this full circle in terms of what they knew and what they didn't know, on the 22nd of February 2021, so before the documentary even went out, the Edinburgh Reporter put out an article saying Police Scotland are satisfied that Luke Mitchell was responsible for the murder, despite a Channel 5 documentary which claims to cast doubt on his conviction and suggests that he might be a victim of a miscarriage of justice. And here comes Detective Chief Superintendent Laura Thompson with the same old nugget that they roll out every time this question comes up. So extensive forensic analysis, door-to-door inquiries, other investigative techniques. We are satisfied that we do not need to trace any other individuals in connection with this investigation. Despite a Channel 5 documentary which claims that he might be the victim of a miscarriage of justice, they were prepared to go ahead and destroy that evidence in spite of those concerns. So I think the suggestion that they didn't know that there were imminent proceedings is absolute nonsense. Doesn't explain why they did what they did when they did it. And now we need to know, if we go back to Cockfuss instructing otherwise. In other words, don't do it the way we would normally do it. Don't follow normal proceedings at all. Do it this way. And this way means there's no paper trail. This way means there's none of the usual tick box exercise. This way actually means, and I want to get this in here because I think it's important, this way actually means that there was no inventory of items as they were taken from Edinburgh to be destroyed. So the lists we have, we can't be sure that there was stuff in storage in Edinburgh that never made it onto those lists. We can't be sure because there was no inventory taken in Edinburgh. So their suggestion that stuff was signed out in Edinburgh and it was all done properly, it's not true. It's not true. And if it had been true, they would show us the proof. But I know that there was no official inventory taken as they were taking the stuff out of Edinburgh. Anyway, I digress. Back to Cockfuss and this instruction not to do it the way it should have been normally should have been done. We're back to a position of power here. It's not some little pen pusher in the main office that suddenly went, oh yeah, no, I'm just going to instruct, I'm just going to issue an instruction for them to do it completely differently to how it's been done before. Of course not. Once again, that had to come from somebody with that sort of authority and that sort of power. I'm not even going to mention conflict of interest here. You all know about it. But my question is, why were these decisions and these discussions happening at such a high level? It's no longer a case of how low can they go, it's how high does this go? And lots of people have said over the years, you know, oh, it's maybe because they're covering one of their own or covering for one of their own or something like that. I don't buy that. I don't buy that. It's sheer incompetence, stitch up, basically. But if these discussions and decisions are being taken at that level, it shows you literally how far they are prepared to go to cover up and refuse to accept responsibility for what they've done, to refuse to even consider that they should accept responsibility for what they've done. If they're prepared to go to that level and decisions are being taken at that level over one case, what sort of state is justice in Scotland actually in? So, over to you guys again. Is that good enough for you? Is it good enough for you that our top police officers and our top legal minds are sanctioning this sort of thing and then trying to hide it? It's not good enough for me. Will never be good enough for me. So I will be updating in the next couple of days on things we can do to have this addressed. In the meantime, thank you once again for joining me on a Sunday evening this time. Yeah, let me know what you think. Thanks a lot, guys.